Hello, my dear guest, once again, for the sixth day for the Seven Tales. This one is about a man's pride of his grand achievements to war, but didn't really deserve his recognition that he gloats about, leading many upon his command to fall for his glory. So we shall begin with the general attending a exquisite party with many other commanding war officials enjoying the festivities and discussing the upcoming battle that many agreed the well-esteemed general of the brutal war in Grimhelm to take charge. Having the prideful general himself accept the offer and do his country proud, and with that the party continued on. Having a officer speak with the general, telling him to keep watch of his pride, walking past the general, and that the general was to turn to speak to the officer, he seemed to have vanished within the crowd of people, letting him continue on. And as for the next months to come, the general was in a base of operations, keeping eye of the battle from a safe distance, making sure to command his men that were there, to have troops make a frontal assault to the enemy, having the men agree to report all troops to storm the battlefield, having the men charge in for a couple of hours, with the army being able to succeed with minimal casualties, getting glorious applause from his men. He accepted the grand grace he was given with the soldiers that were with him, having him and the men he was with to see the results of the battle, with pride to the defeat of the enemy. But one leading officer who was controlling the troops said how it was too easy and should be careful to this particular easy victory, and to send scouts ahead for the enemy's next base, causing the general to say how there was no need, as they are close to victory, with the officer imploring the general to reconsider this, as they could fall into a trap, having the general demand the officer to stand down and to accept the order that he gives, and is to attack once more. Going with his troops back to the safe haven of the command post. With hesitation, the officer told his and the many other soldiers of the army to charge from the general's order, making the men charge in with no hesitation as the general watches. And for when the army arrived to the enemy's base, he should have listened to the officer, as the enemy did plan a trap with a small force at the weight of the enemy base, and having tanks fire and bombard their base, with the general's troops prowling around the place. And seeing this trap, they all tried to retreat, with the enemy forces right on their tail, killing any trying to pull back to the base. The general telling his troops to request for reinforcements, and as such they listened, causing the general to command their tanks to fire for support. And as they do, many troops that were too close to the enemy forces had also been blasted away by this cover fire, with the enemy retreating, and for the leftover soldiers left, and facing heavy losses, the general thinking of options to fall back with his men, or to continue on, having his pride and ego of being their general, spoke out to all of them to not give up hope, as for when the reinforcements arrive, they will be able to make one more glorious charge to victory. Then the officer from before went to confront the general for this negligence, having so many men die, with the general denying and saying of how they wouldn't have enough time and needed to deplete as much troops as possible from the enemy through the tank barrage, and giving vague respect to the fallen soldiers. The general told all the troops to make a defensive line, holding their positions from the enemy attackers for a couple of days, sustaining many more casualties, since that time of holding the line. Having the general command his leftover army and new reinforcements to charge in with the motor charges blasting the enemy first and sending in the tanks after, bringing the full force of the army to strike as the enemy weakened, with the officer angered to this, as only the general had thought of such a plan earlier with thought. He went out with the plan, succeeding, annihilating the forces of the enemy, having the general be proud of such an accomplishment, with many men cheering from the new troops, but not from the officer, who had to witness so many of the troops he had to lead to their deaths from the general's orders, having everyone who were a part of this battle to celebrate in their own way. The general attending a party months later after this brutal battle, and many cheering for the general's bravery and grand battle knowledge in taking out the most vital enemy base to win the war, with the general accepting the praise and was to toast for the glorious admiration until he saw many soldiers wearing smiling masks. He began to shake as they all say together, "You killed us," having him drop his glass, shattering it to the floor, running out, moving many out of the way as the smiling specters followed about to tell his men who were in another room that he was being followed, but he then felt a piercing pain behind him, looking to his dead troops in the room, to his chest, seeing a knife go through it, turning to see the face of the officer and the many smiling soldier spectators behind him, with the officer speaking out as this was for all those men, pulling and stabbing the general over and over again, having the general pull away, barely able to breathe, falling to a desk nearby, looking as the officer leaves and the smiling soldiers approaching the dying general for their final revenge. So this tale of pride led this egotistical man to a realization to not continue fully with your pride, unless it can be for the grander reasons and to doing what's right. Now I hope you have a wonderful day and continue to have a smile on your face.